I never thought a misplaced journal could turn my entire world upside down. But there I was, sprawled on my bed, heart racing, staring at the tiny slip of paper he just slid under my door. How did we even get here? Let me back up a bit, because if I told you the whole story all at once, you'd probably think it was some cheesy rom-com script. So it started about a month ago, when I moved into this small, slightly run-down apartment building in the city. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the place: cheap rent, noisy neighbors, and walls so thin I could probably hear my next-door neighbors arguing over what cereal to buy. But it was home for now, and honestly, I just needed a place to crash while I figured out the next step in my life. My neighbor, yeah, that's where he comes in, was this guy named Jamie. I'd seen him around a few times, always had this quiet, easy smile, and he carried a camera like a badge of honor. He's one of those people who looks like he belongs in a coffee shop, scribbling in notebooks or capturing city life through his lens. I never really talked to him beyond a few awkward hellos in the hallway, mostly because I'm not the best at small talk and, well, I'm kind of private. That journal I mentioned? Yeah, that was mine. I've always been one to keep everything tucked away in words. My hopes, my fears, the stupid little thoughts I don't want anyone else to read. It's like my secret world, untouchable and safe. So, imagine my horror when, a couple of weeks ago, I came home to find it missing from my desk. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, but then I found it open, on the floor in the hallway outside Jamie's door. My stomach dropped. How did it get there? Had he found it? Did he read it? The thought of Jamie, this guy the first barely knew, reading my most private thoughts made me feel suddenly exposed and vulnerable in a way I wasn't ready for. And then, last night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I noticed the note. It was simple, just a folded piece of paper with neat handwriting. No name, no explanation, just a single sentence. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. Can we talk? That line has been looping in my mind ever since. Because now, I don't know if I want to avoid him or finally get to know who Jamie really is, beyond just a quiet neighbor with a camera. What started as a simple accident, it feels like the beginning of something way bigger. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. But I don't think I can just ignore that note either. I stared at that note for what felt like forever, turning it over and over in my hands before finally deciding to respond. I wrote back on the same paper something simple: "Yeah, we should talk. When are you around?" Then I folded it up and slid it under his door, my heart knocking hard enough. I was pretty sure Jamie could hear it. The next day dragged on. I found myself pacing my apartment like an idiot, replaying every moment I'd ever seen Jamie around the building, trying to guess what he must have read in my journal. Was it embarrassing? Cringy? Did he think I was some kind of weirdo? I mean, who even keeps a journal in their late 20s? Me, apparently. Eventually, around early evening, when the light was just starting to soften outside and the city noise was calming down, there was a soft knock at my door. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I opened it anyway. Jamie was there, looking a little awkward, his usual easy smile nowhere to be found. Instead, there was this tentative, almost nervous energy in his eyes that made me realize maybe he felt just as exposed as I did. "Hey," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Thanks for, not freaking out," I laughed, a little breathless. Honestly, I was freaking out. "But here we are," he smiled, a little more relaxed now. "Yeah, look, I'm really sorry for going through your stuff. I found the journal accidentally. I was looking for something I thought I lost and didn't expect it to be. Well, that." I nodded, suddenly feeling a little less weird about the whole thing. "It's okay. I mean, it's personal, but I guess I wrote it to be private, not invisible." Jamie laughed softly. "Fair. So, can I ask what in the world you write about in there? Because I'm honestly curious now." I hesitated for a second, then shrugged. "Everything, really. Sometimes I write about my day. Sometimes it's stupid thoughts. Other times it's stuff I don't say out loud. Kinda like a brain dump." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I get that. I keep a notebook too, but mostly for photography ideas and random sketches." That opened a door between us, an easy, natural conversation that felt way less intimidating than I expected. We talked about art, the city, stupid quirks of our neighbors, and somehow, The fact that Jamie had accidentally read my journal became a funny, almost endearing story rather than this huge invasion I'd been dreading. At some point, I caught him looking at me differently, like he was seeing more than just the awkward guy with the journal. And honestly, I was seeing more of him too. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he listened like he actually cared, the subtle warmth beneath his casual cool. After a while, he glanced at his watch and said, "I should probably get going. But hey, maybe I could take you out sometime? Like, for real. I mean, not just talking about journals." My heart did that thing again, stupidly fast and hopeful. "Yeah, I'd like that." He grinned, stepping back toward his door. "Cool. I'll text you." "Please." He nodded, then paused. "And, hey, thanks for not hating me." I smiled, feeling a little braver than before. "No chance of that." As he closed his door, I leaned against mine, realizing that something had already started between us. Something unexpected, fragile, but definitely real. And maybe, just maybe, that lost journal wasn't such a disaster after all. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Jamie. It was simple, just a morning, and a little smiley face emoji, and suddenly, my phone felt heavier in my hand than it had in years. I spent way too long deciding how to answer, eventually settling on a morning coffee. It felt dumbly casual, but better to keep it that way at first, right? He replied almost instantly. "Sounds perfect. I know a place around the corner." We agreed on 11 a.m., and I found myself actually looking forward to it, which was new for me. I'm not usually the type to be all nervous about a coffee date with a neighbor, but there was something about Jamie that made me want to be better at this whole getting to know someone thing. When I got to the little coffee shop he'd mentioned, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and way too many plants, I spotted him right away. He was sitting by the window, fiddling with his camera like it was a living thing. When he saw me, he stood up and gave me that smile again, the one that made my stomach do flips. "Hey," he said, stepping aside so I could sit. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound like I was about to trip over my own words. We ordered our coffees and then just talked. Not about anything heavy or overly personal. Just the kind of easy conversation that happens when you're genuinely interested in the other person. He told me about this photography project he was working on, documenting everyday life in the city, capturing moments people usually miss. I told him about my job, my weird obsession with old sci-fi movies, and how I secretly wanted to write something more than just journals. There was something magnetic about the way he listened, like he was really paying attention, not just waiting for his turn to talk. I felt myself relaxing, laughing more than I had in a long time. At one point, we both noticed the rain starting outside, the kind of rain that sneaks up on you and makes the city feel softer somehow. Jamie suggested we stay a little longer, and I agreed without hesitation. It was during one of those quiet moments, the kind where you don't feel the need to fill the silence with words, that I realized I was already starting to care about this guy. Not just as a neighbor or some random distraction, but as someone I wanted to know more deeply. After coffee, we walked back toward our building, sharing an umbrella that was way too small, and laughing at how soaked our legs were by the time we got inside. Jamie stopped by his door, turning to look at me with something unspoken in his eyes. "I'm really glad you didn't freak out about the journal," he said softly. I shrugged, feeling a little shy. It's kind of weird, but maybe it's good to have someone see that side of me. He nodded, stepping a little closer. Maybe we both needed a little accidental honesty. I smiled, feeling that warmth spread again. Over the next couple of weeks, things between us grew in this quiet, steady way. Jamie and I ended up crossing paths almost every day, sometimes grabbing a quick breakfast, other times just chatting in the hallways, or exchanging silly texts about the weird things happening in our building. One evening, I found myself standing outside his door, holding a small notebook I'd picked up on a whim. It wasn't my journal, something about that felt too vulnerable still, but I wanted to share a piece of myself with him, something that wasn't just words hidden away. I knocked softly and he opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. "What's this?" he asked, holding out his hand. I handed it over, shrugging. "Just some stories I've been working on. Thought maybe you'd like to read them." He smiled, flipping through the pages. I'd love that. That night, we sat on his tiny balcony, sharing stories and dreams, the city lights twinkling below us. Jamie told me about the moments he'd captured recently: an old man feeding pigeons, a street musician playing under a flickering lamp. I shared bits of my own writing, the parts that felt brave enough to say out loud. It felt like we were building something real, something that started with a lost journal and a note slid under a door but was growing into so much more. And there was this feeling, deep and quiet, that whatever happened next, I wasn't facing it alone anymore. After that night on the balcony, things between Jamie and me started to shift in ways I hadn't fully expected. It was subtle at first: longer conversations, touches that lingered a second too long, and a shared comfort that didn't feel forced or awkward. It was the kind of connection that sneaks up on you when you're not paying attention, but once it hits, it's impossible to ignore. One Saturday afternoon, Jamie invited me to come along on one of his photography walks. I wasn't sure what to expect, mostly because I'm not exactly what you'd call a photography guy. But I said yes anyway, feeling like I was craving more of whatever this was between us. We met near the park, both carrying cameras. His a fancy DSLR, mine an old disposable camera I'd picked up just for fun. Jamie had this easy confidence behind the lens, chatting about angles and lighting like it was second nature. I, on the other hand, was fumbling with settings and hoping the pictures would come out less blurry than the last time. But somewhere between the cracked pavement and the rustling leaves, I started to see the world through Jamie's eyes. Not just the places we passed, but the way he noticed the little things. A kid chasing bubbles, a couple holding hands, a dog wagging its tail like it had no worries. At one point, Jamie stopped and pointed to a graffiti-covered wall. "Stand there," he said, motioning for me to pose. I laughed. "Me? Really? Trust me, you look way more natural than you think." So I stood there, awkward as hell, while he snapped a few shots. When he showed me the pictures on the camera screen, I was surprised. There was this softness, this honesty in the way he captured me. It made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. As the sun started to dip, painting the sky in pinks and golds, we found a bench and just sat there, breathing in the quiet. Jamie turned to me, his eyes serious for a moment. "You know, I never thought I'd find someone who gets me like you do," he said quietly. I felt a lump in my throat, the words hitting deeper than I expected. "I think I've been waiting to hear that for a long time." He smiled, that slow, genuine kind, and I realized I was smiling too. Maybe even a little wider than I should have. But then, just as things felt like they were settling into something comfortable, Jamie's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his smile faltered. "Sorry, I have to take this," he said, stepping away. I watched as he talked quietly, his brow furrowed. When he came back over, his usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by something tighter, more guarded. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just family stuff," he said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, not wanting to push but feeling the weight of whatever he was holding back. That night, I lay awake, thinking about Jamie and the way he'd looked just before the call. It made me realize that maybe, for all the openness we'd shared, there were parts of him still hidden, shadows he wasn't ready to show me yet. The next day, I decided to cook dinner and invite him over. I figured if he wanted to talk, I'd be there. If not, maybe just a distraction would help. Jamie arrived with that same camera in hand, but something was different. He looked tired, like he'd been carrying the world on his shoulders. We ate in comfortable silence at first. Then I asked, "Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then sighed. "My dad's been sick. It's been rough. I didn't want to dump it on you, especially with everything else going on." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "You don't have to carry that alone." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the walls start to crumble a little. "Thanks," he whispered. From that moment, things between us grew deeper. Not just the fun, easy stuff, but the real, messy moments too. We started sharing fears and hopes, the kind of things you don't always say out loud. One night, as we sat on my couch with the city lights stretching out behind us, Jamie turned to me and said, "I'm glad you found me. Even if it was because of that stupid journal." I laughed. Yeah, who knew a lost journal could lead to all this? He smiled, leaning in close. I guess sometimes the things we try to hide are the things that bring us the closest. And as our lips met for that first time, everything, fear, uncertainty, all of it, melted away. Because finally, in that moment, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After that night, everything felt different in the best way possible. There was this new kind of closeness between Jamie and me, like we weren't just neighbors or friends anymore, but something more complicated and real. It wasn't flashy or over the top. It was quiet, steady, the kind of connection that sneaks under your skin and makes everyday moments feel important. We started spending more time together, sometimes just hanging out at my place watching movies, other times exploring the city with our cameras. I kept bringing my little notebook, and Jamie always encouraged me to write more or just talk about what was on my mind. It was like he saw something in me I hadn't even noticed before. One weekend, Jamie suggested we visit a small art gallery downtown. He said there was an exhibit featuring local photographers, including some of his work. I wasn't really into art galleries. Felt a little intimidating, honestly, but the way he talked about it made me curious. The gallery was this cozy, slightly hip space filled with framed photographs lining the walls. Jamie's photos were scattered, among others. Simple but powerful scenes of city life. A woman laughing on a street corner, an old man playing chess in the park, a kid chasing pigeons under a gray sky. They all had this raw honesty that made me pause. "What do you think?" Jamie asked, watching my reaction. "It's incredible," I said honestly. "You really capture something real." He shrugged, a little shy. "I just try to see the moments people miss." We wandered through the gallery, talking about the stories behind the photos, and I found myself opening up too. I told him about my dreams of maybe writing a book someday, about the fear that held me back, about the parts of myself I still kept locked away. Jamie listened like it mattered, like every word was a piece of a puzzle he wanted to understand. And I realized I wanted to be that person for him too. After the gallery, we grabbed burgers at a nearby diner, a little greasy, a little loud, but perfect in its own way. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that stretches long into the night without feeling forced. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should take a trip." Just the two of us. My heart skipped. "A trip?" "Yeah, something to get away from everything here for a bit. To just be." I hesitated, the usual doubts creeping in. But looking at him, the way his eyes shone with that quiet hope, I felt something inside me shift. "I'd like that," I said, surprising even myself. We started planning a weekend getaway to a small coastal town a couple of hours away. Neither of us knew exactly what to expect, but that felt exciting rather than scary. When the weekend finally came, we packed light and hit the road early Saturday morning. The drive was filled with music, laughter, and easy conversation. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The town was everything we needed. Quiet beaches, winding streets, and a pace that slowed time itself. We spent the days wandering hand in hand, exploring little shops, taking photos, and sharing stories under the sun. One afternoon, we found ourselves sitting on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The wind was salty and wild, tugging at our hair and clothes. Jamie pulled me close. "You know, I wasn't sure about us at first, but now, I don't want this to end." I looked into his eyes and felt my own fears melt away. "Me neither." He smiled, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on my arm. "I think I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time." I swallowed, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm glad you found me, Jamie, even if it started with a misplaced journal." He laughed softly. "Who knew a little accident could lead to this?" As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we leaned into each other, the world around us fading away. In that moment, it didn't matter what came next. We had this. And sometimes, that was everything. That night, after we'd watched the stars blink awake over the ocean, we found ourselves back in the tiny cottage we'd rented, its windows foggy from the cool sea air and the warmth inside. Jamie was sitting on the worn-out couch, fiddling with his camera, while I sprawled out on the threadbare rug, feeling more content than I had in a long time. I glanced over at him and caught that familiar softness in his eyes. It was the kind of look that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, maybe even the whole world. I'd never been great at expressing how I felt, but something about being here with him made the words easier. I started shifting to sit up. I don't think I've ever felt this relaxed around someone before. He looked up, smiling that quiet smile that always made my chest tighten. There's something about being away from all the noise, the city, and maybe being with the right person. I laughed, the sound light and genuine. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's just the ocean air. He grinned. Ocean air or not, I'm glad you're here. For a moment we just sat there, the silence between us comfortable, not awkward. Then Jamie shifted closer, his elbow brushing mine. Can I ask you something? He said softly. Shoot, have you ever thought about us? Like, what this could be? I swallowed, heart suddenly racing. It was the question I'd been asking myself, but hadn't dared to say out loud. Yeah, I admitted. All the time. Jamie's eyes searched mine, and I felt like he was trying to read every unspoken word. Me too. I guess I was just scared to say it. Scared of what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, scared of losing what we already have, of messing things up. I reached out, taking his hand in mine. I don't want to lose this either, but I think sometimes the only way to keep something real is to take the risk. He squeezed my hand gently. You're braver than you look, I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Maybe you're the brave one for sticking around. That night, we fell asleep tangled up together, the sound of waves crashing outside blending with the steady rhythm of our breathing. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us, and for once, that was enough. The next morning, the sun streamed through the curtains, casting soft light over Jamie's face. He was still half asleep when I watched him, tracing the line of his jaw with my finger. It was funny how someone I barely knew a few months ago had become this important to me. We spent the day wandering the beach, his camera clicking as I posed awkwardly, or tried to capture the perfect shot of the horizon. We talked about everything, from his hopes for a photography exhibit to my long-held dream of writing a novel. There was a quiet understanding between us, a feeling that no matter what the future held, we'd face it together. But as the weekend drew to a close, a knot tightened in my stomach. The real world was waiting. Bills, work, responsibilities. And I wasn't sure how we'd fit this new, fragile thing into our everyday lives. On the drive back to the city, Jamie reached over and squeezed my hand. We'll figure it out, he said. That same quiet confidence I'd come to rely on. Yeah, I agreed, trying to believe it. Back in the apartment building, the usual noises greeted us, the hum of the heater, the distant clatter from upstairs. But now, they felt less like background noise and more like the soundtrack to something new. That evening, Jamie and I sat side by side on my couch, sifting through the photos he'd taken over the weekend. Every picture held a memory. The salty breeze, our laughter, the moments when time seemed to stand still. He paused on one of me standing on the rocks, looking out at the ocean. You look different here, he said. Maybe it's because I'm not thinking about all the things I'm supposed to be doing, I replied. Jamie smiled, leaning his head on my shoulder. Maybe you just needed a reminder that it's okay to breathe. And in that moment, I realized that the note he'd slid under my door all those weeks ago wasn't just an apology or an invitation to talk. It was the start of something that neither of us saw coming, but both desperately needed. Whatever comes next, I know one thing for sure. I don't have to face it alone anymore. And that, honestly, feels like the best beginning I could have ever hoped for. The days after our weekend getaway felt like we were walking on this delicate edge, between the safe cocoon of what we'd built and the messy, unpredictable reality waiting outside my apartment door. I kept wondering how we'd mesh our lives together when everything else was clamoring to pull us apart. One evening, Jamie showed up at my place unannounced, a bottle of red wine in one hand and a mischievous grin on his face. "Thought we could have a proper no distractions night," he said. I smiled, suddenly grateful for the simplicity of that. "Yeah, sounds perfect." We settled into my living room, the city's hum filtering through the cracked open window. Jamie uncorked the wine and poured us both a glass, the deep red catching the light as he handed me mine. "So," he said, swirling the glass thoughtfully, "how are you really doing? Not the 'I'm fine' version." I laughed, a little bitter but honest. "Honestly, I'm terrified. This whole thing with you, it's great, but it's also the scariest thing I've done in a long time." He nodded, eyes serious. "Me too. I haven't been in a relationship that felt this real, vulnerable." We talked late into the night, peeling back layers I hadn't even realized I was hiding. I told him about the journal pages I'd never shared, the fears about being seen, about not being enough. Jamie opened up about his dad's illness again, how it made him scared to get close to anyone, to not be the strong one all the time. There was this moment, quiet but powerful, where I reached out and took his hand. We don't have to be strong all the time. We can be that for each other. He squeezed my hand back, and I felt the weight of everything, the fear, the hope, the possibility, settle between us. A few days later, Jamie invited me over to his apartment. It was small, filled with books, photos, and that unmistakable scent of coffee and old paper. The walls were covered in framed shots from his projects, each one telling a story I was starting to understand better. He led me to a corner where a small table was set up with a camera, some film rolls, and an old Polaroid. "Thought we could try something fun," he said, eyes shining. We spent the afternoon experimenting with the camera, me awkwardly trying to pose while Jamie patiently adjusted the settings and gave me tips. At one point, he caught me off guard by snapping a candid shot just as I was laughing at something silly he said. When the photo developed, a blurry but beautiful image of me mid-laugh, I felt a strange mix of vulnerability and joy. "You really know how to make someone feel seen," he smiled, "because I want to see you, all of you." That night, as I walked home under the glow of streetlights, the city felt different, less cold, less overwhelming. It was like Jamie's presence had shifted the way I experienced everything, the noise, the chaos, the loneliness I'd grown used to. But with that shift came a new kind of tension, the kind that comes when you're opening yourself up to someone and the fear of losing them looms just beneath the surface. One evening, Jamie and I were sitting on the fire escape, sharing a bottle of cheap beer and watching the city lights flicker below. The conversation had drifted to the future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. "I don't know what the future holds," Jamie said, staring at the skyline, "but I want you in it." My throat tightened. "I want that too. Scary as hell, but I want it." He turned to me, eyes earnest. "We don't have to have it all figured out. Just take it one day at a time." I nodded, feeling a kind of relief wash over me. Maybe that was the secret. All this fear, all the uncertainty, was worth it if it meant we were willing to try. The weeks that followed were filled with moments like that, small, imperfect, but real. We learned each other's rhythms, the little habits that made us who we were. Jamie loved to make coffee in the mornings but hated doing the dishes. I was terrible at remembering to water plants, but he was patient about it. One rainy night, as we were curled up watching an old movie, Jamie reached over and brushed a stray hair from my face. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought I'd find someone who gets me like you do." I smiled, heart full. "Me neither. It wasn't perfect." There were days when fears crept in, when the weight of everything threatened to pull us apart. But every time, we found our way back. Through a text, a touch, a simple, "I'm here." And as I sit here now, writing this all down, I realize that losing my journal was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it led me to Jamie, the guy who slid a note under my door and without even trying, found his way into my heart. It's funny how life works sometimes. That journal, my private little sanctuary, was never meant to be found. Yet it was the exact thing that brought Jamie and me together. Looking back now, I can't imagine where I'd be without that accidental discovery. A few months have passed since then, and I can honestly say I'm happier than I've been in years. Jamie and I have settled into a rhythm that feels right. Not perfect, because nothing ever is, but real. We still have our fears and doubts, our moments of awkwardness and miscommunication, but what matters is that we face those things together. The other night, we were sitting on the fire escape again, watching the city lights flicker beneath us, the same spot where Jamie first said he wanted me in his future. I looked over at him, his face soft in the glow of the street lamp, and I realized how much I trusted him, how safe I felt sharing my thoughts, my dreams, even my scars. I never thought I'd find someone who makes me want to be more open, I told him quietly. He smiled, reaching out to squeeze my hand. And I never thought I'd find someone who sees me, all of me. There was no grand declaration, no sweeping gesture, just two people sitting side by side, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it as a team. I pulled out my old journal that night, the one Jamie found. It's still a little worn, edges frayed from being handled more than I expected. I flipped through some pages, not with embarrassment this time, but with a kind of gratitude. Those words, those raw moments of vulnerability, they were the starting point of something beautiful. Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt a quiet warmth settle in my chest. Sometimes love isn't about fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about the small, unexpected moments. The lost journal, a note under a door, a shared smile in the hallway that slowly build into something that feels like home. And in that, I've found more than I ever dared hope for.